it would make it fair. It kind of gets around the fairness issue. I'm kind of agnostic on all religious ideas, but I like the idea.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, Garrett. We're just going around, introductions and how each person feels about tonight's topic or how they're feeling overall.
Cool.
Celicia, can you hear me? Can you wave if you hear me? I'm not sure if he hears me.
I don't think she does. Or she would be waving. I'll call her.
Hi, everyone. Lots of people coming in tonight. I see Sandy, Madej, Brooke. I apologize for that. Eleanor, Frank, John. If anyone would like to jump in next and introduce themselves, go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Gary. My name is Sean.
Hey, how are you, Sean?
Yeah.
You can't hear me through the computer? Okay. All right, bye.
Yeah, I can hear you. Do I believe incarnation? I would say no.
Hey, my name's Aaron.
Basically,
how's everyone's night going so far?
Buddhism, right? Incarnation is a huge thing in Buddhism. If you believe in Buddhism, right, you say if you do good deed, after you die, your next life you will be a good human. On other
Isn't
hand,
that called nirvana? I was learning about that in class the other day.
yeah,
Hi guys.
Aaron, wait your turn to speak, Aaron, or you're going to get removed from the session.
I'm sorry.
First rule here is politeness, so you have to remain polite.
Hey
If
Garrett,
you do-
can you please mute your mic and let Sean speak?
if you do bad or do evil, next life you become something else, like maybe become a dog, some bad animals. Okay, you will suffer. So this is a Buddhist teaching. Karma. Okay, so maybe
I like this one.
spiritually you can think about incarnation, but physically I don't believe it. Right.
Have we started reading this?
What's that, Paul?
Oh, hi. Did we start already? I just joined.
We're doing a social, so we're all kind of introducing ourselves, and I forget, Ellis, what your question was.
Garrett, mute. Let Sean talk.
Oh, we're just seeing how we're feeling today or how you feel about tonight's topic of reincarnation, just very short. I know how you feel about it, Will.
Well, if you guys are asking me, I'm a very strong proponent of reincarnation. There's a couple of different twists, if you will. I could tell you what those twists are if you guys care. Otherwise, I can just hold off and cover later.
I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, it's a little hard to understand you, Paul.
Oh, I'm sure I got a headset on. I'm not. I'm walking a dog, trying to get a walk in with him. You hear me now?
It's not very clear, to be honest.
Can you mute please? I'm trying to pay attention.
You may need to restart your device. Turn it off, turn back on. It's hard to hear. Maybe just me. I can hardly hear you. Okay, very.
Yeah, I think with reincarnation, I like to be reincarnated.
Is this better?
Yes, that's much better.
No, that's not working.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, Paul, did you want to introduce yourself and state how you're feeling or how you feel about reincarnation? Very short.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Is that better?
Much better. Okay, much better.
Okay, yeah, my for some reason, I apologize. Sometimes my headset gets flaky where the audio, I can hear you guys fine, but you can't hear me. So,
Yeah, please go ahead, Paul. We have a bunch of people with their hands up, so go ahead.
oh, okay. The two twists are all reincarnation, your reincarnations, your reincarnational focuses are past, present, or future, are all in one big now. So your future ones exist in the same time frame that you're in right now. So the whole concept of karma doesn't really play out because you got your future ones occupying the same, now concept. And that the other twist is that we only we don't reincarnate as frogs or tadpoles or birds or anything like that. So that's the only two twists that I have.
Got
That's
it.
kind of interesting and confusing.
Brooke, do you want to go?
Yeah,
You want to go
that's
next?
true.
Let's just keep the social introductions, and then we can have conversation after the presentation if that's all right.
Garrett, did you want to take hands or you'd like me to do it?
Brooke, go ahead.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm assuming they can.
Yeah.
All right, so rather than give my opinion on reincarnation, I just wanted to quickly speak about the most scientific approach that's been taken to study it at the University of UVA. I believe it's called the Division of Perceptual Studies. If any of you are familiar with Ian Stevenson, he's now dead, but this new guy, Jim Tucker, is taking over his work. So some of the key findings on reincarnation is that they go around interviewing children, and you have children who claim to remember past lives, often providing really detailed and accurate info about their previous identity, like their name, place of birth, and family members. And many of the children display behavior and preferences that are, coincident with how this person would have lived, based on what was known about them. So I just I'll stop there, but I just think it's interesting that at some point, if we bring Dr. Stevenson's, much more robust and scientific approach to this, I think it would add a nice flavor to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I posted some articles that I think included his research in one of the groups that someone was questioning whether or not there was any scientific evidence for reincarnation. And so I used a bunch of examples of studies that were validating it. So thanks for introducing that, Brooke. Peter, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Peter. I'm from the DC area. I remember thinking about this. This wasn't specifically related to what I'm about to mention, but it did occur. Sort of the June of the first year of our pandemic, when we were sort of all in lockdown, and I sort of was contemplating. I mean, it must have just maybe been because we had death that was all around us, on the global scale. But yeah, no, I reflect on this thing. Well, I'll get into it further, but I always sort of think about it from the perspective of, well, there's sort of Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of like the eternal recurrence. And I mean, maybe I don't understand that concept accurately, but I think it's something like basically you just keep repeating something for eternity, or you assume that you would. And then the other one is, of course, that there's John Locke's, his idea of the continuity of consciousness, which is like sort of the whole issue of identity, and whether what identity means in terms of relationship to new or past lives. Anyway, nice meeting everyone, and that would be my introduction.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Sandy.
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm from Toronto. Thank you for the topic, Garrett. I read your essay as well as the one on free will. Still grappling with that one. I also believe it wasn't free will. Sort of, as Paul was saying about the future and present being at the same time, is that sort of like the Akashic records that, that's sort of the free will question, versus, multiple realities, and you just sort of like shift into a neighboring reality as you make a decision. So everything possible exists. On your topic of reincarnation, I do believe in it. I believe I really enjoy listening to near-death experiences. One of my favorites is Howard Storm. If anyone's ever listen to his sort of testimony. And just my belief is that we come down, we put on this meat suit, our soul, and we experience what was put in front of us as a life path to evolve our soul. We, go up and we come down, we repackage, boy, girl, tall, short, black, white, doesn't matter. And just to continue the progression of the soul. If you believe in a God, if you believe, so there has to be a purpose to all of this. I believe that the life purpose is, maximize happiness and be in service. But beyond that, the soul purpose is to evolve into higher frequencies and, gradations of light. Thank you.
We're very aligned there, Sandy. Thank you for doing the homework. Not many people do, and I appreciate that you did. So you get an A+. So Sunny, I'm sorry.
Hi there, I'm Sunny and I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This is my first visit with this group. I was intrigued by the topic. I believe that reincarnation is as possible as anything else. We live in a world of possibilities. And the gentleman who spoke prior to me certainly reflected many of my thoughts on the topic. But my interest developed early on. I don't believe there was ever a time in my existence that I did not have a sense of reincarnation. This is going to sound wacky to a lot of you, but when I was a small child, I had up until maybe until I was age 40, I had reoccurring dreams about a person. And as I aged, that person aged. And the person her name was Olympia. And I traveled through this person's life from beginning to her tragic end. And the experience, sure, I could have overheard this while I was a small child. I could have watched it on TV or heard a movie or read a book. It's very possible. I really don't know. But the experience was very real to me. And I would drift back in and out. Every time I dream about her, I drift back and forth between like watching something happening and being something happening or being that person. So I do have that in my past, which, like I said, it could be that I have an incredible imagination and I just haven't funneled it into being a good writer. But that's one of the reasons I'm here. I was wondering if anybody else has had that kind of experience. That wasn't my sole experience. I've had others that led me into a sort of acceptance of this topic as being as possible as anything else. Heaven, angels, reincarnation, all could be the same to me. But anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Sunny, for sharing. And I think you're going to find Celicia's story and experience is interesting. And Cow, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Oh yes, hello. I'm Cole.
Cool.
And
Thank you.
yes, nice to meet you. Nice to
Nice
meet
to meet you.
everyone. I actually found this group from Starseed Nation from Cilicia. Actually, this is my second time in the Zoom meeting. So I'm actually shocked because the previous meeting we had only like a few people, but now we have like around 50, which is amazing. So I joined this group because I'm interested in reincarnation. This has been a topic that I've been thinking a lot, like deep thinking, and because I also did some Buddhism teaching. I'm not really religious myself. I'm just interested in religion as a concept of learning. And I know that in Buddhism they teach a lot of reincarnation and where you're bound to reincarnate from hell, from demons, from humans or gods and stuff like that, animals. And there's also another, like reincarnation is a big topic. There's a lot of different opinions. I also heard people say that it's karmic reasons that you come back here, and there's a lot more like trauma and the bad things you do. Personally, I think reincarnation it's like playing a character. It's like choosing a character that you want. and we all have free will to do so. And I think that life is similar to a simulation, and we are living in a simulation and like a video game, taking on the roles we want to take, taking different roles. And personally, I think the negative side of reincarnation exists is not because we are punished for it, but because there's sort of an emotional attachment to it. And that's why some people might say that we come back here to repeat this, even though we don't want to, but we are just having that, we have that attachment to this world. So that's what I've been thinking about when it comes to reincarnation. Thanks.
Great, thanks. You missed our event on the simulation hypothesis. I tried to make a logical argument that even if we're living in a simulation, the winning strategy is to treat it as if it's real. So it's irrelevant whether or not we're living in a simulation, if that's true. But thanks for sharing your opinion, and welcome to the group. And I'm gonna get your name wrong to Medea.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, how is everyone?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thanks for the group. This is really an interesting topic. I believe that spiritually and personality, I think we all return from up above and to back down, like the Jacob's ladder. I think spiritually we all come back. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And we're gonna go ahead, it's about 7 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and sort of kick things off. So just to sort of start off, I want to introduce myself. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm the software developer turned software inventor and now entrepreneur. Invented my own software and started a company with it. And my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy. I'm also the executive director of the Freethinker Institute, which is the organization that's hosting tonight. This is our Tuesday night series where we have events every Tuesday at 7 p.m., 6:45 p.m. we start until 9. And a little bit about the Freethinker Institute. We're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We really want to help people be the best versions of themselves, seek truth, and be fair through transformational personal and professional development. These events are really intended to help teach things that are not commonly taught in academia or industry. And we also have members only events that are intended to apply practical wisdom into our daily lives. There's only one rule in the Freethinker Institute, and that is to remain polite. We have what we call the 5 intentions, which are things that we think we should all be intending to do, but the only cold, hard, fast rule is to be polite. And so that just means let's stay calm, cool, collected, and objective about things, and allow people to share their opinions without confrontation. But it's always good to ask thoughtful questions about why someone believes what they believe, especially if you think their idea is outrageous or crazy. Better to ask questions why they came to their conclusions rather than try to prove them wrong. So that's what we call listening to understand in the Freethinker Institute, which is where we learn more than we do by trying to prove people wrong. That doesn't help us learn, whereas trying to understand someone else's perspective does help us learn where they came up with their perspective. So that said, I'm going to sort of introduce the topic. I'm basically going to try to make a logical case that reincarnation is actually more likely to be true than not to be true. And as part of the pre-work, I gave an essay defending free will, which is the first part of the argument. We're not going to have time tonight to go into that argument in detail, although we had another event on that. But maybe we're going to have to, I'm going to give like a 30,000 foot summary of the argument. You know, hopefully the implications of the argument defending free will that I've made will become clear as the night progresses. And then we had another event where basically we're gonna basically show why if my argument for free will is true, then reincarnation is most likely reality. By the way, I don't think it's super important whether or not people believe in reincarnation. It's more for me an academic exercise, as long as people don't think they're getting away with doing the wrong thing in this life, which is really where reincarnation does come into play. because I don't think we get away with anything. Like, we all get held to account, whether in this life or the next. And usually it happens in this life, in my opinion. I believe in what's called same life karma, which means that we reap what we sow in this life most of the time. But that said, you know, I will say that, you know, it's actually, not only, in my opinion, basically I'll talk about how, it's not only my opinion that we do have, like, that reincarnation is real, but that, it actually means that we're, in good hands after we die, in that we're treated fairly. And that sort of relates to coping with the death of a loved one, because if we know that our loved ones are in good hands after they die, then we can take some sense of comfort knowing that, you know, that they're not gone forever, but that they'll be back in another form, and that they'll be able to learn lessons in their next life that they didn't learn in this life. And if they were good people, that they'll have more influence in their next life, most likely. And so we also have a guest speaker, Celicia Jackson, who has a not-for-profit that talks about star seeds, which are people whose prior incarnations were in other parts of the universe. I'll also talk a little bit about how the broader universe, and I have an essay on the origins of the universe, origins in quotes, because I think I'm a believer in eternalism, was mentioned in the chat, that the universe is eternal. And so she'll share her experiences on the topic and conversations that she's had with other people in the space. So that said, I'm going to kind of kick things off into the presentation portion of the evening. And can you see my screen? A quick thumbs up if people can see it. And by the way, we're going to save questions for the end. So Tyne, I see you have your hand up. We're going to save questions for the end based on popular opinion. People like having questions at the end, rather than have the presentation portion get interrupted with questions, then people lose the train of thought. So we do those at the end. And, you know, after both Celicia and I have gone, we'll leave it open to people to ask, you know, thoughtful questions, present alternative viewpoints. You know, all ideas are welcome as long as they're politely presented. And I'm assuming you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, it looks good.
Excellent, thank you. So, so agenda-wise, sorry, that's an old agenda. So step number one is that we have, you know, is basically I have a pretty solid argument that we have what's called libertarian free will, which means we make non-deterministic decisions, which means if you're deciding whether you eat cornflakes or Cheerios in the morning, your genetics and your environment are not the only thing that decide. You actually have the ability to choose either cornflakes or Cheerios, and you can pick either one. And really nothing, like no amount of science can with 100% accuracy determine which one you're going to choose, because it's not decided yet, and it's not decidable solely through the laws of physics or what are called the natural laws in philosophy. So I would argue that we can intuitively feel like we make decisions. And so I would argue that the belief that we have libertarian free will also aligns with our natural intuition that we have libertarian free will. It's really that science has made so many advancements in the last 500 years that we like to think that, or a lot of people like to think, and I did when I was younger, I was a determinist atheist, that that science will eventually have the answer to all questions, including whether we're going to eat Cheerios or cornflakes for breakfast. But the truth is, I'm pretty confident now that that it won't. And basically, my argument for free will, when summarized, essentially says there's something called Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which basically says that there's no perfect paradigm that you can ask every question to, and it will always answer with 100% accuracy. And what that means is that even the laws of physics themselves are not a perfect paradigm that you can ask every question to. And if you were to take the passage of time and the physical universe as a question and answer sort of scenario, where you ask the laws of physics, what will happen at the next moment in time? And then, you know, through the passage of time, the laws of physics sort of answer by creating the next moment in time. Then the next moment in time, basically, if only the laws of physics decided the next moment in time, the laws of physics would actually be a perfect black box. where they answer every question with 100% accuracy because they would perfectly accurately describe what's going to happen at the next moment in time. And that basically would mean that determinism was right. But because there is no perfect black box that exists, what that means is that there has to be something else influencing our future. And that means either randomness and or free will have to be playing a factor. And if randomness and or free will are playing a factor, it seems far more likely to me that we really do have free will than that randomness has disguised itself as free will and made us think that we have free will, but it's really randomness. Some people believe that. I think that's a very unlikely thing to believe. In my essay, I sort of write all of this out in pretty detailed. It's one of the longer papers I have, or essays, since I don't publish. But that's kind of the quick intro to the fact that we have free will. The next thing is, if we do have free will, what is the root cause of this free will, or the and so if we have either randomness or free will, I kind of covered this, there really has to be some essence of ourselves that I call the spirit, religions call it a soul, that is the origin of our free will. And interestingly, if my argument is right, that spirit or soul is not physical at all. So a lot of people say, well, the soul is energy. No, it's not energy, because energy is a physical substance. It's mass energy. And so if I'm right, it's actually not even physical in any way, shape, or form. It's not photons, which are 100% energy. It's not mass. It's not mass energy at all. It's actually something else. It's something metaphysical, which means that it puts me into something that I used to laugh at, which is called dualism, which means that you have a non-physical component of ourselves and a physical component, which is obviously our body, which no one really disputes whether or not we physically exist. Not many people. But that said, the question is, like, where could a metaphysical spirit come from? I would argue that a metaphysical spirit, not being mass energy, had to come from somewhere. And I can't imagine any way that the universe itself, which, if you look at the sun, the solar system, the universe, the physical universe, I don't understand. I can't conceive of a way, and I have a pretty good imagination, but I can't conceive of a way that a non-physical thing could evolve from a physical universe alone, right? How can something physical create something non-physical? It doesn't really make sense. And so, that's where I would argue that the spirit had to have come, indirectly or directly from some higher power, which is what I call God with a lowercase g, because I think that the Abrahamic God was pretty much proven not to exist by Epicurus's argument known as the problem of evil, which is basically just that if God is omnipotent and benevolent, why would he allow evil to exist in the world? Why not just allow a little bit of good, a lot of good, neutral, but no evil, right? No really horrible things happening. But we see all of these really horrible things happening, and I would argue that that's because God is not omnipotent, but I think God is very powerful, and so I would argue basically the way that I hypothesize that this happened is that when life on Earth became complex enough that it could house a spirit, God or his servants or basically imbued life with a spirit giving it free will. And so that's where the origins of free will on Earth came, is that once life became complex enough to be able to have a spirit, right? Like I would argue bacteria probably don't have a spirit, right? They're pretty much deterministic. I don't think bacteria are making non-deterministic decisions, but dogs and cats make non-deterministic decisions. I would argue they do have a spirit. Now there's going to be some crossover and area of, where I would argue you can study, organisms and decide when are they making non-deterministic decisions. And once they are, then I would argue that's where you can actually, make a solid argument that organism has a spirit. There have been some studies actually that say plants perspire when you put a sharp object next to the plant. So it's possible that plants have a spirit. I'm not going to make an argument one way or another, but I found that fascinating when I learned that they perspire. Again, I'm not going to try to argue where the cutoff is. I'm just going to say somewhere there's a cutoff. And for humans, we have a spirit. For bacteria, probably they don't. And there's some middle ground. So some people say, why did God create spirits in the first place? I would argue the reason was to increase happiness and decrease harm in the universe, because I think we all have an inherent proclivity to want to increase happiness and decrease harm. And by the way, that's really the reason that my not-for-profit exists, is to increase happiness and decrease harm in the world and to help people do it more effectively. And I would argue that God expects us to do that, and to increase happiness and decrease harm for people we can influence. And I would argue that's actually an innate purpose of life, expected by God, who gave us free will. Even if you don't believe in God, utilitarianism is a secularly grounded morality. And I don't think it's important whether you believe in God or not, as long as you're increasing happiness and decreasing harm. I don't think God cares whether you believe in God or not. At least my concept of God doesn't. I think it's more important that we do right by other people and the people and beings that we can influence in this world. And so, utilitarianism more or less goes for that. I kind of riff on utilitarianism a little bit and have my own way of enacting it that I think is a little bit better than the way that it was traditionally espoused. But that said, I would argue that utilitarianism is aligned with what I think is God's purpose for us in life. And that kind of brings us to, would a metaphysical spirit be disposable? Like, does it make sense that we have a metaphysical spirit, but after we die, it just disappears and goes away? I would argue that that's probably pretty unlikely, because why would you make a one-time use metaphysical spirit? And so I think that it's very unlikely that a lot of concepts of religion say that we go to either heaven or hell or eternal bliss or damnation after life. And I think it's very unlikely that that we would have eternal bliss, eternal damnation, or simply disappear after life. That's not a very meaningful existence, to simply disappear after our mortal life is over. And I also don't think it's very fair to give us eternal bliss or damnation based on 100 years on this earth if we're lucky, and we live longer than most. Maybe it's 110 or 120 if we're one of the top tier guys, but I don't think it makes sense to get an eternal punishment or reward based on a finite 100-year roughly life. And so I would argue that something happens to the spirit after death. And that's where I would argue that God basically treats us with compassion, in that the metaphysical spirit is recycled so that after we die, we get born again, so that we learn in the next life the lessons that we didn't learn in this life. And as one of the people in the social was talking about, where we basically continue to evolve as we learn. And some of us are evolving and progressing, and some of us are regressing and going backwards. And I would argue eventually, like, we will all evolve and learn, and the only right direction to go is upward and onward. But until we learn those lessons, I would argue we continue to suffer in life. And the more that we embrace learning knowledge and wisdom, and how to apply those to increase happiness and decrease harm, the more we suffer. And the more we try to increase happiness and decrease harm, and there have been lots of studies shown that the more people help others, not to their own detriment, but once taking care of themselves, the more they help others, the happier they are. And so I would argue that this plays out in scientific research as well. And I would also argue that because God is fair, the more that we do increase happiness and decrease harm in this life, the more influence we would get in our next life. And because of and vice versa, if we're causing lots of harm and minimizing lots of happiness, then we'll probably be less influential in our next life. And Hitler's probably a cockroach in some like someone's New York City apartment, and getting stepped on right now for his 1000th time, because he caused so much harm. And so that's just a, you know, an example of what I think happens after death, is that we're, you know, we're treated fairly and we're given the chance, you know, eternally to continue to evolve and learn as we progress spiritually. So how do we achieve this life of happiness and minimizing harm? I would argue this is where I mentioned the Freethinker Institute has 5 intentions. And these are the 5 intentions. One is to work hard, to use reason and intuition to be the best version of yourself, seek truth, and to be fair. And when I say be fair, you'll see that I described that in the 4th intention as increasing happiness and decreasing harm for yourself and those you can influence. Number 2 is to be transparent about your beliefs to the extent that you trust someone, and listen with an open mind, where you can learn new things that will help you achieve the 1st intention. Because, you know, a lot of us get stuck in confirmation bias. We had another event on confirmation bias, talking about how to overcome it. And it's really having an open mind that helps us overcome confirmation bias, which means, you know, getting stuck and mired in our current beliefs and not accepting new evidence that proves our current beliefs wrong. So having an open mind helps us overcome our current beliefs that are incorrect and evolve as a person. And number 3 is honing your critical thinking skills and being able to rely on them to discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly with as much accuracy as possible. And this is an ongoing thing. And one of the things we're going to hone in on in the Freethinker Institute, we're going to do an event on critical thinking skills, or probably multiple events on critical thinking skills, because it's one of the main goals of the organization, is to help people have better critical thinking skills. Because I think there's a real dearth of critical thinking skills in the country and the world, quite frankly. So 4th is, you know, to work hard to increase happiness and decrease harm for yourself and those you can influence. And then a 5th is, 5th intention is we all want to be loved, so we should have an eagerness to give and receive love. That's both platonic as well as romantic. Platonic is just, you know, friendship sort of love, as well as romantic. So where will I be reborn? Well, I made an argument in another presentation that the universe is actually infinitely large, both in terms of space and mass energy. If true, that means there are an infinite number of life forms in the universe. Yes, aliens. And if you think of just how ridiculously large our known universe is, it's huge. And to think that we are absolutely the only planet in this ridiculously huge universe that has life seems a little bit silly to me. Then again, when I was a child, I thought that the idea of aliens was silly, and I watched ET and I was like, oh, maybe this is what, you know, this is all science fiction. But when you think about how big the universe is, it actually becomes more silly to think that we are the only instance of life in such a vast universe. And if I'm right that the universe is infinite, then it's unfathomable that we're the only type of life in existence in it, or the only planet with life on it. And so the chances are good, if reincarnation is true and the universe is infinitely large, that some of us will be reborn in other parts of the universe at some point in time, or were in the past. And so, you know, with that, I want to introduce Celicia to tell her story.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay.
Hey, Garrett, while there's just a moment here, about to go, I'll shut up.
No, go ahead.
Just to fill in the gap while you're getting that done there, Celicia, I just thought I'd just share a remarkable coincidence that just happened. As Garrett was saying, there's probably somebody somewhere at this moment in New York City killing a cockroach. I've had a cockroach in the house since this morning. It's a victim of cockroach baits.
Would you ring tonight?
Sort of they slowly die.
Tomorrow.
Or should I shut up?
Can everyone see my presentation? It says past life experiences. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Garrett?
Yep.
Okay.
Pre-life experiences is what I see now.
Okay. So
Pre-life.
I'm here tonight to speak on reincarnation because I have a meetup group called Starseed Nation, and it's composed of people who believe that they have had lives in other worlds besides Earth. And some of these people have memories of life before they incarnated on Earth. So right before they became a fetus, they have a memory of that, or they have a memory, I'll go through it. So some people have a memory of existing in a void. It's a black space, seems like there's no time there. There doesn't seem to be an edge, seems peaceful. Some people describe feeling an all-knowing feeling. Some people feel they were on a different dimension. So based on the dimension, you might feel more emotional, less emotional. The way you perceive things might be different. You might see everything as shapes or outlines. Some people claim that they're from a different galaxy, like the Andromeda galaxy. So a galaxy is a cluster of stars, gas, dust, billions of stars. Some people claim they're from a star. Our star is the sun. Star is a giant luminous ball of gas held together by, it has its own gravity. Some people claim they're from a different solar system. So the planets orbit a sun. And so we have 9 planets in our solar system, but some people claim they're from a different solar system or from a different planet other than Earth. Some people claim they've been on satellites. Satellites are bodies that revolve around objects in space, such as planets, but not stars. Okay, and then some people have memories of existing on Earth prior to this life that they're living right now. So why do they believe this? Some people do an astrological chart reading, and somebody gets their birth date and they map what time they were born. And from there, they can somehow see how the planets were arranged, and they can figure out your past lives. Some people consult an intuitive reader. It's a person that can read energy. Some people consult a psychic medium. That's somebody that has contact and connections to the spiritual world. Spirits could be people, animals, plants, or some type of energy like orbs. Some people claim that an alien visited them, told them that they had a past life either on Earth or outside of Earth, or an angel or a spirit, such as a ghost, a family member that's passed away. Some people do channeling. So that's a way of having a spirit work through you. A little bit later, we're going to talk about a lady, Dorothy Eady. She channeled some spirit and she wrote like 70 pages of notes, and she realized that it was her own past life in Egypt. Some people realize they've had past lives because during meditation, where you step away from everything, such as work. When you quiet your mind and you just take everything off of your mind and you're just faced with yourself, your bare bones self, sometimes now things under the surface, in the subconscious memory, it comes to the forefront. And the same with self-reflection, the act of simply just asking yourself, have I had a past life before? Can bring something that is underneath to the forefront. Somebody here mentioned about recurring dreams. Maybe it was Sunny, or I don't remember, but as you'll hear in a few minutes, some people have recurring dreams, terrors, nightmares, and they're really just memories or reliving something traumatic from your past over and over and over again until hopefully you resolve it. And then I just said memories. Some people have memories, and you can tell the difference when you're daydreaming or making stuff up versus having a memory. Well, I think you can. And then there's something called past life regression therapy. So a therapist puts you in a relaxed state, and they use verbal prompts and other methods to bring your subconscious to the forefront. And then they explore, in past life hypnosis, rather than other types of hypnosis, they explore if you've had a past life. Some therapists just stick to past lives on Earth. Other therapists, like someone named Dolores Cannon, focuses on past lives outside of Earth. So those are the range of reasons why someone would believe that they had a past life. So I have some case studies here. Let's see if this works. So one is the pre-birth. So one is the pre-birth. Like I said, there are some people who have memories of existing right before they came to Earth. So, oops.
We can't hear the audio, Celicia.
I'm sorry?
You can't hear the audio.
Okay, let's see if I can fix that. Sure. Video. Okay.
Where's your audio coming out, Celicia?
Out of my computer.
Is it out of your speakers?
Yes. I'm going to
It
change
may,
this
it may not work.
You need to press the play button again. It's paused now.
Okay. All right, let me try this and see if this works. I'm sharing it in a different way. Okay, can you see it?
That's better.
It's insane to hear other people talk about it, because all of our experiences are pretty much exactly the same, minus a few details, very little ones, very little details.
I was asleep for many, many years in a dark place called the Void.
The Void? The Void. Mm-hmm.
I was in a black void. There was no sense of time, or sickness, or death in this place. You are simply just raw being, a spirit.
just drifting into a black space all alone.
And I was floating around, and I was experiencing pure bliss. It's the best feeling you could ever imagine. You can't describe it into words. You can't.
It is love and peace and bliss and joy and comfort and security. You feel it all around you and also inside you because it is making up everything. When the light comes into the picture, it is all you can think about. The only thought that exists to you anymore is getting to the light. It is incredibly magnetic.
Something like calling me over behind me, like turn around, fly over here. I was being beckoned. Somebody was talking to me telepathically.
From the corner of my eye, I see a shining bright white light. It's the shining being, the shining one as I call it, approaching me.
I remember that I absolutely loved it and I didn't want to go. I also remember through telepathy, there was no word spoken to this bright light. And this light very lovingly just made it known that I didn't have a choice.
Okay, so a lot of the beings in that world communicate via telepathy. It's very rare to hear that they actually speak. And another thing to note, on the other side, it's not just the void. There are people that exist in realms that have a rainbow of colors or a strong green or a strong blue, etc.
Well, the shining one told me I would be going to the world.
And then a beam of light woke me up saying, "The time has come for me to go down again."
Where you are going, it said.
And it was like really fast that all of a sudden they were like, the guide was like, it's time to go. And I was like, what are we? And they were like, you're going. And I was like, I'm going? Okay.
Through the window, or on the screen, I can't remember what it was, I could see Earth.
With that request, because I had this like little window open that was not available all the way. And I remember like holding on for a super long time and being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And sending a signal back through the window. Did it take?
Myself in this space with the oval window. A large planet loomed directly outside. One stepped forward. Very matter-of-factly raised one hand toward this planet, which I now recognize to be the Earth.
A pin dot of light appeared into a perfect circle. I could see the stars and the Earth.
I chose my life. I chose my mom. I do know that. I chose the family I wanted. I chose the body. I chose how I wanted to look. I chose a lot of things. There's a lot of things that you get to choose before you come here.
All the way, that's not everybody. In my case, I didn't get to choose anything. But some people get to choose aspects of their lives or map it out in great detail, and some people that's never presented.
So in this life, I accepted the veil. The veil came over me, and then I was in the womb.
I knew what was going to happen. They were going to send me down. I didn't want to go, and I kept asking them, please, if I'm going to go, can you please let me remember this place? I want to remember. I want to remember. And they kept reassuring me, and they allowed me to remember. They allowed me to remember this place. And as I got that confirmation that they were going to allow me to remember, I was okay with going. At this point, I was gone. I remember being sucked down into this like tube, and the fear came over me right then and there when I started getting sucked down into this tube.
All I know is I started being pulled more towards the Earth. Now I felt like I was a shooting star but heading towards the Earth. As I get closer, the stars were just flashing past me so fast it formed like white lines or streaks, but yet in a tunnel. Before I knew it, everything went black.
Okay, so those are very, very tiny snippets of hour-long testimonials, but after watching many of them, you'll start to see patterns. And I noted some of the patterns here in this video. And so you have to ask yourself, if it's one person saying it, they sound completely nuts. Two people, okay, two people are schizophrenic. But when you have hundreds of people giving a very similar story, it might be a reason to take a closer look and consider maybe there's some truth to this. So while I set up the second video, I'm going to run a poll. And the question is, do you recollect having a past life somewhere other than Earth? The poll is anonymous, so I'm going to launch it now.
Just to share that for me, yes or no, it's so binary. Like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to hear about that.
Well, like I'm starting to get some kind of vague intuitions, but there's that self-doubt that I've heard is common in the beginning, where you don't know if you're imagining it or.
So, like the guy said, just about everyone that I researched gets the veil of forgetfulness. Prior to getting the veil, a lot of people feel like they are all-knowing and they are connected to everyone, and they can remember all their past lives. Some can remember future things that haven't happened. I don't know how. But then once they put the veil of forgetfulness, you don't remember your whole history and everybody else's history. So you might be in this phase right now where you have amnesia. It's there, it's inside of you. The memory is there. It's just you can't access it yet. So the results of the poll, out of 52 participants, 32 answered, and 11 said yes, oops, and 22 said no. So about 1/3 said yes out of 33. All right, here's the next video, and this is about people who remember past lives on Earth. So now, okay, so these are noting similarities between the stories.
2.5 months old. It's amazing. Cade was an early crawler, early talker, early walker, early everything. At 1.5, 2 years old, he was using very intricate words, very intelligent words. He could hold conversations with adults.
He would speak complete sentences way ahead of his peers.
He had all of his milestones early. Started walking around 11 months, chattering very young, speaking small sentences shortly after he turned a year old.
I've fostered over 100 children, all infants and toddlers, and compared to them, Aiden was far beyond. His capabilities, his knowledge was so much more than any other normal child that I've ever seen.
When we tried to lay her down in the crib, that didn't work. Minutes after we lay her down, she'd wake up and she'd be crying. She'd actually scream a lot of the time, terrified. We tried moving the crib into our bedroom, but that didn't work either.
The first time I ever heard him say that he had had a bad dream, Eric suffered from night terrors. From the time Eric was born, I never got a full night's sleep. He would wake up every night, sometimes crying.
And on a few occasions, he would tell us that he was killed. How were you killed? And he would say, I was crushed.
It was around the age of 3 that Kate started talking about that he remembers dying. I would be in bed and Kate would just start crying in the middle of the night. And he would wake up screaming about working in a tall building. And that he could see the Statue of Liberty from his office. He told me he dreamt that he was falling with the building like the way he died.
Started to ask him some questions. What happened to your plane? It got shot. Well, who shot your plane? The Japanese. Well, how do you know it was the Japanese? And I think he said that night, the big red sun. Where could that come from? How could he articulate something that specific? So I kept going. I said, well, where did your plane come from? And he said, a boat. Did your boat have a name? And he said, yes, Natoma. Here was this history of USS Natoma Bay, CVE 62. This ship supported the Battle of Iwo Jima.
It was, what can you say?
It was a complete mystery. Where could he have gotten that information? How could he say something like that?
One day my husband brought home a guitar from where he works.
Actually, some of these parents claim that the kids don't watch TV or they're not in daycare and they have no exposure to other children. So that's what they claim, that they don't really know where they got the information from.
And Olivia just picked it up and just started playing. Olivia has never ever played a guitar before in her life, never. She adjusted the knobs and she just started singing maturely, and the song she was singing wasn't like Old MacDonald or B-I-N-G-O. She knew what she was singing. She was in rhythm with the guitar, and I've never actually seen her sing before. But when she did it, it was like she was a natural. And I looked at her and I said, where'd you learn how to sing like that? She said, Mama, I used to be a singer.
My daughter Riley was born with gray hair, knew about the Titanic, and also sang a burlesque song from the 1930s by heart.
This is a popular one, the Titanic.
When she was 9, we walked through a park and came across a statue. She ran right up to it and started yelling that this was her past daddy.
So school is a place where Willa suffered a great deal. So it's ironic that it's also a place where she finally found answers. She came home and she was so excited. And she said, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy. And I said, what? And she said, the orphan train, there was an orphan train. And she was putting it all together. She suddenly realized that some of the things that she had begun glimpsing had a basis in reality.
Jamie was around 4 years old, and we had gone out one night and left him with a babysitter. And when we came home, we found out that Jamie had watched the last half of the Titanic movie, which is not something we were happy about. And the next day, he started drawing and painting picture after picture of the Titanic. Within the first 2 weeks, he probably had painted 50 pictures. One, he had over 100 windows drawn in. One pencil drawing, he has all the levels of the ship. Like if you cut the ship in half and you can see all the different rooms and everything. He knew the ship. He knew it by heart. You can't learn that by watching the movie.
So one interesting thing that I noticed in researching all these cases is a lot of them have this point in their life where there is some information that's given that will open the door completely to the past life memory. So a lot of the kids are having night terrors. and they are accessing memories. But then, like we saw here, there'll be a chance encounter with watching a movie or going to a historical site or seeing something in the newspaper, and then boom, it unlocks the memory completely. And so a lot of the cases had that strange synchronicity.
From the time Eric was able to speak complete sentences, he was always talking about Hollywood.
He talked about Hollywood every day. He wanted to go to Hollywood because he had to go to work.
When Nick would play with his soldiers, it was the only time Nick would be quiet and play quietly without having to be supervised.
One of his favorite toys was playing with the army men, you know, just moving around and have little battles. I didn't really think about it too much at first, but as we noticed over time, he would start to like set them up in different formations, and he would put them all on a line, and they were very particular.
It was more than just a boy taking a soldier and going, pow, pow, bang, I got you. There was strategy behind his play.
Irrational fears.
We would go watch fireworks. It would scare him to death. He couldn't actually sit and watch fireworks.
We had gone to a friend's house for 4th of July celebration. They were starting the fireworks, and immediately I saw his terror. He yelled, "Incoming." Where did that come from? And he ran to me and threw himself over me to protect me. He kept saying, "Head down, Mom, head down." And he kept pushing his hand on my head. I yelled for Matthew. Something really traumatic was happening. I said, "Oh God, what are we gonna do?"
Jada has been telling me since she was about 3 years old that she was glad she picked me as her mother. She talked about picking her father, picking me.
He said that he chose me and he came back, and that's how he was born.
So that's consistent with what we heard in the last video, where some people do pick their parents and other things.
And he said that he used to watch me. And I said, how did you watch me? And then he was kind of indignant about it. He goes, well, you know, there's windows in heaven, Mama.
And he says, well, I know who my mother is. I know that you're my mother because I saw you from up above the clouds. I looked down at him and I said, really? You saw me from way above? He says, yeah, before I came here. So I said, well, how did you get to me then, if you saw me? He says, I had to jump. And I had to slide down on a string. And he says, it was a little scary, but I held on and I came all the way down to you. And I said, where? How did you get into me? And he says, well, I came through the top of your head, the crown of your head, all the way down. And he traced his little hand down to my stomach. And he didn't break his sentences at all. Like he didn't break his thought. The entire time that he told me, he says, I saw you. I can see everything. And I chose you.
Okay, so those are the little tiny snippets of hours of testimonials, and watching the video seems a little silly, but once you hear the children give lots of facts, dates, times, places, names, they go into details of things that happen, and then you start cross-checking and verifying, then you start to lean on the side of credible. And a lot of these parents don't even believe in reincarnation, but they either have to, they're either now on the fence or they began believing in reincarnation because their child turned them into a believer. So I'm going to, another thing I wanted to say is, what wasn't in the video, is some of the kids also experience visitations by spirits, either spirits that were on Earth that are related to the family, or spirits from the other world, the ethereal realm. At this point, I'm going to do another survey. It says, do you recollect having a past life on Earth? And the other survey is, I'll do after. Okay, it says out of 28 people that answered, oops, out of 29 people that answered, 13 said yes and 16 said no. So it's almost half and half. Okay, and there's another poll. Of those that answered yes, how were you able to recollect your past life? Oh,
Quick time check, Celicia. How much more do you have?
I have about maybe 3 or 4 more slides.
Okay.
So I'm going to share the results. So 17 people answered. 1 person did an astrological chart, 1 psychic medium, 1 intuitive reading, 4 meditation, 2 channeling, 9 dreams, 2 memories, 5 past life regression. Okay. So I want to mention the near-death experience because that sort of relates to this. So that's not really coming back as another person. But people who die, they're pronounced dead and they go into this other realm. Over in the other realm, some being may educate them about having previous lives, or because they have that experience of going into the other realm, they then begin to believe in reincarnation. So what is the proof for reincarnation? So proof we think of in mathematics, science, law, medicine. Earlier, Garrett gave like a mathematical logical proof, but it's difficult to do a scientific proof because you usually would need to run an experiment to measure something that is going to happen in the future. And these accounts have already happened. So the next best thing you can do is cross-check the accounts. And what you can do is, okay, and another, in terms of people thinking like what proof is weighty or what proof is valid, a lot of academics rely on journals, research papers, surveys, and plenty of that exists in the field of reincarnation. So earlier, Brooke Helleck mentioned Ian Stevenson. He was someone that worked at the University of Virginia in the perpetual studies department. And he got a very generous donation that allowed him to study this from 1960 to, I think 2007 is when he passed away. So they studied about 3,000 cases, and as of 2021, 2,500 cases have been, 2/3 of 2,500 cases have been verified true. 1/3 of the children have the same birthmarks or defects as the person they claim to have come back as. 20% speak of death, 20% speak of life in another world, 18% verified by medical records or autopsy. He claims that fraudulent cases are very rare. So this guy to the right, Jim Tucker, has succeeded Stevenson and has taken over his work at the university. There are other, we saw this guy in the video. So what you can do, this is Jim Levinson, and you can cross-check historical facts, records, birth certificates, death certificates, video, audio, whatever, to confirm your story. This lady, I mentioned her earlier, Dorothy Eady, she was able to pinpoint archaeological sites, and she wasn't always right, but she made some pretty phenomenal findings in Egypt. Oops. Recreation, some people can draw and recreate things from the other person's life. Okay, and like I said before, there's hypnotic regression therapy. And there's something called neuroimaging, which it's not a perfect science, but you can tell if a person is accessing a true memory or if they're lying. Is there room for skepticism? Of course, there's always room for skepticism. So like Ian said, there are fraudulent cases, but it's not really worth anyone's time or money. So it's very few. Some people don't count eyewitness accounts as scientific proof. Paramnesia, giving the person's account too much credit. One of the things they didn't show in the video are sometimes the parents can ask suggestive questions and give the kids the answers. And sometimes you could be stretching to find similarities between the different lives when really the evidence is not there. So like I said before, Stevenson, not all the cases are verifiable. And there are false memories. So if we go back to the brain scans, it's not a perfect science, because if you believe the memory is true, it's going to read in your brain that it's true. And there are people that are able to outsmart the technology by thinking about something true while they answer the questions while doing the brain scan. So the benefits of reincarnation and past life remembrance, if you want to do any of the methods spoken about earlier. So Garrett mentioned the 5 intentions of the Free Thinkers Institute. One of the big ones is minimize harm, maximize happiness. And what happens is once somebody starts remembering their past life, they can realize why they're in this life right now. It could be to have some resolve or to have a redo from something you did in a past life. And so you kind of maybe have to recall the experience in the past life to figure out what you can do in this life to resolve it. And sometimes you are spinning your wheels and you have this, you're doing the same addictive pattern or negative pattern over and over again. And you don't realize it's something from a past life, the reason why you're doing it. So those are reasons to look into your own reincarnation to minimize harm and maximize your happiness. And one last thing, what I didn't really touch on are when we come into this life, there are accounts that we keep coming over and over and over again with the same people, the same beings. And so, you know, like in this life, your mom is your mom, but in the past life, your mom was your daughter or something like that. And so it's a way to really look at people more compassionately, because based on your relationship with someone in your past life, it might explain what your dynamic is in this life. And you realize it's like just one continuous thing. And maybe you want to change direction or think of people more compassionately, because what goes around seems to be coming around. Okay, and now Q&A.
Thank you for that presentation, Garrett and Celicia. So we're opening up for questions and comments. We have until 9, so I would say about 2.5 minutes per comment and wrapping up by 3 minutes. I guess, Garrett, you want to go ahead, start to take hands?
Yeah, Octavio.
Well, I don't have a question, but I have some thoughts to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that for reincarnation, I think that having children is a kind of reincarnation. And etymologically speaking, etymologically speaking, reincarnate to come back to flesh. And I think naively speaking, children are a kind of reincarnation. And I say it because I find it very interesting how we are a copy of our parents, and I see a lot of myself in my family. Things that I thought were original for me actually are things that my my family does. And I think yeah, so I think that we're our parents, and I mean that's not to say that we don't get anything from our guardians, like our school teachers, but I think largely we are an amalgamation of our parents as far as reincarnation is concerned. And I also want to say something quick about the afterlife. That not only is reincarnation a kind of afterlife, but I think that becoming dust, as they say, is also a kind of afterlife. But instead of becoming another mammal, we become part of the mineral realm. We become dust and water. We go on to live in eternal darkness, comparatively speaking, with human consciousness. Becoming minerals is a kind of eternal darkness, I'd like to think. But it is, I think we are conscious, being dust, and I think we are conscious, and that we go into other beings and on our planet or in the universe. And so those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Octavio. And just to, I didn't mention it earlier, but when people are get their chance to speak, please stick to less than 2 to 3 minutes, and stick to one comment or question at a time, and then you can raise your hand for another question or comment after you get the chance to share that one, just because we have a lot of hands up and we want to give everyone a chance and sort of rotate in. That said, thanks, Octavio, for your sharing, and Brooke, I want to let you go next.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to speed run this, but I just want to say for anything in this sphere, one of the primary ways forward is to look for consistent recollections or consistent personal recollections across culture, distance, and time. So there are a couple meta-analyses that have done this, but only with respect to NDEs. And this work has identified about 6 consistent factors, which I'd just like to move through because I think people will find it interesting real quickly. There's the feeling of peace and serenity. There's the out-of-body experience. There's the tunnel experience, which I think most of us are familiar with. There's meeting deceased loved ones and some type of life review. And then finally, the after effects, the transformational effects. Obviously, I mean, it has a huge impact on a person. They change many things about their life. And in closing, I just want to say one of the things I've heard anecdotally is that there are many people, mainly children from the UVA research, who do have birthmarks in the area of the body where they report a mortal wound. And a good proportion of the children interviewed can recollect a very violent moment of death. So I think another thing to think about is that severe death circumstances also tend to be associated with the population of people that can recall previous lives. Anyway, interesting food for thought. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Brooke, for sharing. Yeah, I posted a link to some, meta study on a bunch of studies about reincarnation for people that want to read more about the science behind it. So let's see, you're a co-host. You can just go if you want to share stuff. You're on mute though.
I'll let this person go and then I'll go after.
Okay, David, go ahead. Good to see you, David.
I think an interesting poll would be who would prefer no afterlife versus, in other words, a one-shot deal, this is it and that's it, end of story, versus reincarnation.
Say that again, David, I'm sorry.
I think an interesting question for the group would be who would prefer this life to be a one-shot deal? You have this life and none other, nothing after, no afterlife.
Yeah.
Versus reincarnation of some sort.
So let's see, if you know how to do that poll ad hoc, feel free. Otherwise, we can have people just write it in the chat. I think we had to prepare the polls ahead of time, so we may not be able to do it ad hoc.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I would welcome people.
I'm pretty sure in this group, I'm pretty sure the overwhelming response would be yes, let's go for something rather than nothing. Which
I mean,
tells
I was actually very surprised at the number of people that have memories of past life experiences. I think it was a third of the audience. So I think the topic attracted that. I don't think that large of a percentage of the population at large has memories of past life experiences. So unless you know otherwise, Celicia, you would know more about this.
Well, this is my point being a simple point is that it's such a attractive proposition to have something rather than nothing. To me, it questions the credibility of the whole topic, I suppose. That's all I've got to say.
If I could stay in the ethereal realm, then yeah, I would just keep that life. But if it's just this life, I would want to live again.
Yes.
But to follow up on Brooke's comment, he said the near-death experience are the only ones that have like a standard. And Dr. Stevenson, he had a standard too. The counts had to correspond with the deceased person's life. Previous families, they weren't supposed to know each other ahead of time. The subject statements were recorded before verification, meaning before the families would meet. Case was investigated by a specialist no more than a few months after its development, to prevent contamination of the account. So he had a standard too. I just wanted to add that.
Great, thanks. So Robin, go ahead.
Actually, Garrett, you and I talked online with a private message just a little bit. I just am interested in past lives. I'm not sure if I'm not sure what my beliefs are, but I'd like to study the matter more in depth, and I'd like to go over it with a qualified therapist or medium, and I'm having real trouble. Lisa, may I contact you via your group? Do you have access to folks who you feel are qualified or credentialed to help with this? I found a lot of scammers.
I don't. There are people that have advertised to me, but I've never done their service, so I can't recommend anyone. But I can, yeah.
I wish I'd
I can-
kept track of the person that told my wife and I when we wanted to have kids that we were going to have twins. I would never have guessed that. I think that one was legit. I was like, yeah, right, we're going to have twins, and here we have twins. So
Robin,
I think she was legit, but
yeah, I have your email. We can talk. I know some
Evie,
people.
you have one? Great.
Yeah, I know people.
You know people, that's wonderful, because that's what I've been looking for somebody who somebody would recommend. So I appreciate the conversation. I also appreciate there's a million other people who want to ask a question, and I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
Great. Will, go ahead. Thanks, Robin.
Will, I think you're on mute.
We can't hear you anyway.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can hear you, Will. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to offer something from the skeptic side of things. So I'm open-minded. I was in a organisation called the Skeptic Society of Australia, and what I found was the people in that group, they are as fascinated by this type of thing as others, as anyone. They really are. But in order to get to any semblance of truth in anything, whether it's alien abductions, ghosts, paranormal of any kind, you need to be extremely skeptical, because every man and his dog's got a story about this or that. People make things up. People got problems in their lives. People got mental illnesses. You can say, oh, yeah, no, I was the princess in Utopia land because I had a dream about a prince giving me a bunch of flowers. Oh, so I'm a princess, and you better believe it. Otherwise, you're an evil skeptic. And what I'm saying is, I'd say 99.99% of this stuff is absolute baloney. However, there is one little skerrick of sand that cannot be explained. And I've seen a couple of those things, and that's when it gets interesting. But to just believe anything with very, very little proof whatsoever is a very dangerous road to go down, because a lot of people will spend their whole life believing something that is absolute, utter fabrication. However, I do believe that there are some things that are genuinely worthy of further investigation, but 99.9% of it's absolute rubbish, I'd say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Will. There's a lot of misinformation going around, and some of the people in the chat who were getting a little rude were honing in on the fact that, that I understand why people would be skeptical about this, but I do encourage people, not only was my argument extremely summarized, like we spent an entire session just talking about the argument on free will alone, and that was already a lot to cover. And I covered way more ground than that in a short period of time. So I get why people were skeptical of my argument. But if you're skeptical of the arguments, dig into the details and understand the essays that go behind my argument, but then go into the scientifically backed, peer, reviewed research on this topic that Brooke honed in on and is clearly more well-read than I am on. And I posted another link to the chat. There's a lot of peer-reviewed research on this that you can look into with experimental data backing the evidence for reincarnation. Go ahead, Will.
Just what I mean, and I wanted to clarify, when I say it's rubbish, I don't mean to sound disrespectful at all. and I don't rule things out completely. So I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it can be dangerous because a lot of society, a lot of people have personality dispositions where they'll believe anything without any evidence whatsoever. And not only do they believe it, but they start prosecuting the case like it's 100% true. And you've got to be so careful with this stuff, and it can be very dangerous. That's all I'm saying. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say 99.9% of it is rubbish. I mean, 99% of it, 0.9% of it is just completely unverifiable and made up, I'd say. Okay, thanks.
I mean, I would be curious to know if you want to raise your hand again and answer this question, where you're getting that 99.9% belief, because you seem to believe very strongly in that number, but I think you just made that statistic up, if I'm honest. So, so you know, I think we happen to be someone that's believing your statistic without actual evidence.
Okay, no, good point. I did make it up. I confess.
Yeah.
When I say 99.9, I meant that as a way of.
So we'll read the peer reviewed research on the topic, and let's let Stephanie go next.
Vast majority, I meant.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Hi. It's nice to be here. I don't know, I just found this group, and yeah, I just had a question about I always heard with reincarnation that you choose your parents, and the woman that was speaking, this is the first time I ever heard that sometimes you don't choose your parents, and I kind of wanted to know, like, what is like the difference, like why do some people choose their parents? Because I always wonder, like with my family members, like I'm like, I'm always like, oh, I like never want to see these people again in the afterlife, and I'm like, are they forced to be around me like for eternity? Like I don't know if that makes sense. I just want to know, because I just like, I feel like I wouldn't have chosen this family if I could have. Like, why would I have chosen them?
I'm going to let Celicia start on that, and then I might chime in. You're on mute, Celicia.
I was not in my pre-birth experience. I was not given a choice. I was.
You remember that you weren't given a choice, or you don't remember whether or not you were given a choice?
I remember that I was not given a choice.
Got it.
But in some of the accounts, some people put up a fight about going, and at that point, the being will say, okay, we'll let you pick certain aspects of your life. And there were other accounts where they were coddled, like almost spoiled. They could take their time, they could think about many different timelines, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess it's depending on whoever is guiding you.
And I would, if my argument is right, it might also depend on what happened in your past life, how much freedom you have to choose about your next life. I mean, that's my hypothesis, until I can
Are
find
you
something
saying
better to
like
believe in.
karma, like if you did bad things
Yeah.
in your past life, so you won't get like choices in the next life?
I don't want to put
If that
Celicia on
makes
the
sense.
spot and say that. But
No, because
maybe,
some of the people who had atrocious past lives still got to pick aspects of their next
Interesting.
life. So people who were evil or bad. So I think it depends on whoever's guiding you, whoever's in charge of your reincarnation.
So what does that mean? Like there's different beings that guide every human being. Like what does that mean?
Yeah, if once you start listening to the different accounts, it's not always the same being. Like in my case, it wasn't a light being that. It was humanoid creatures. So and the beings could be different colors. They're not always white. So, and some
Right, like
some are very
different.
loving, and then like in my case, mine were very, I don't want to say cold, but maybe neutral, very matter of fact.
Because like I just want to say this last thing, sorry, because I know we're supposed to keep it short, but it's like I feel like I've had like problems with dreams like since I was a child, like dozens. Like, and I mean, at this point, like, you know, I've had to get checked out. Like, they say it's PTSD, but it's like I had all these crazy ass dreams like since I was a child, and like all like all different things. And I'm just like, I don't know, like it's confusing, and that's why I keep going back to like the concept of reincarnation or past lives, or like I'm always trying to figure out spiritual things because I'm like I don't understand all these like childhood dreams. And I had a question and I totally forgot. I'm sorry. Speaking too much.
So try one of
Yeah.
the methods of recollection. Try out a few of them.
I will also say, Stephanie, I don't have any past life memories, but I used to have recurring, you know, very scary dreams, and I did my own dream interpretation. And when I interpreted those dreams, they were actually trying to tell me about actions I needed to take in my life. And after interpreting the dreams and taking the actions, the dreams went away, and I stopped having those scary dreams. And so I basically solved the problem through my own dream interpretation. So, you know, that is another thing to consider when looking at scary dreams.
Yes,
But
it
how
could
do
be
you do
something in
like
your
dream
subconscious.
interpretation? Is
If
it
you
like
want to
a
reach out, go to
video?
our online community and you can share your dreams with me, and I'll try to help you if I can.
Yeah, it could be
Okay, okay.
something deep in your subconscious that needs to be brought to the forefront so you could deal with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys.
Yep.
Welcome.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, so I also wanted, before I believe there is a thinker who is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, Will, if you're from Australia, there's a thinker I'm sure you're probably undoubtedly familiar with by the name of David Chalmers, who coined the term the hard problem, which is essentially that it's an issue related to skepticism, which is that there's just something that's very difficult, and I want to say like impenetrable about when we talk about consciousness, because it goes beyond sort of the sort of empirical realm into the sort of first person perspective. But anyway, that wasn't actually what I was going to say. I was thinking of this show that I was watching last year called Russian Doll, and it proposes this idea. It's sort of like near-death experience, but I mean, I've sort of skeptically wondered about. I mean, yeah, the eternal question of what happens after you die, but I've also wondered what happens. It's not so much after you die that I wonder about, but sort of in the process of dying, and whether that's by car accident or cancer or heart attack or whatever. And if there is, it's sort of like if there's things that are unresolved. I mean, I've heard this a lot when it's related to like ghosts and stuff, which is if there was something that was seriously unresolved in your life, do you just, you know, time constraints aside, you just sort of in some way cycle around that thing until the sort of the loop is closed, and then either you pass on or I mean, yeah, you would pass on. But so like if you, I don't know, if you had a horrible abuse or your PTSD, or I don't know, you're just really had a grudge against someone your entire life, or a secret that you were holding on to, whether or not that's sort of like almost like an iterative loop in a computer program. It just sort of just keeps going and going until it's resolved. And sort of there's this element of sort of in religious thought about, you know, you spend somewhere in eternity, and eternity is less of like an actual measurable time period, as more just a state of, well, in the sort of the hellish idea, it's like you're stuck in an unpleasant, immovable spot. Whereas I guess the idea of heaven being the opposite, that you're sort of, it's the endless, boundless, loving freedom of sort of possibility. And so anyway, it's not reincarnation per se related, but it is on this sort of the bookends of life. So I thought I would bring up that topic and see what your thoughts on sort of this sort of cycling at the end of death.
So, Lucy, do you want to comment on that?
Are you asking what could finally put the cycle to an end?
Sort of. I mean, I'm more sort of, I mean, I'm skeptical about, I mean, being skeptical about going from life to life. I'm more, if we were just relegating it to the idea of just the sort of our scientific understanding of consciousness, if there's an element of like, I mean, even in our own like living day-to-day life, we sort of, especially if somebody, for instance, has like obsessive compulsive disorder, or they have some sort of way of thinking, we just sort of get trapped in these loops. And so it's like the brain wants to have a story that it can resolve before, I guess, before dying. But I mean, even you don't have to be dying. It's sort of like our brains are sort of wired to have a story, and then by the nature of having that story, we want it resolved. So if there's something unresolved, if it's sort of there, that is related.
I think I know what you're getting at, Peter, where we want an answer, and so we connect dots that may not make sense to connect. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, they may be dots that don't connect, or they may be dots that do connect, but or I mean, it could be dots that don't connect in terms of epistemology, but it could also be experiential things that need closure, like somebody who, you know, they've been carrying a secret their entire life, or they have regrets, they have bad memories, and it's just sort of, you will just keep cycling them. It's sort of like if someone has trauma, and they sort of, you know, they go to a therapist, and they have to eventually confront the trauma to transcend it, and because otherwise they'll just keep repeating it over and over and over and over and over again. So it's more like if somebody comes to the end of their life and they haven't resolved their trauma or whatever it may be, that, yeah, they need to resolve it by hook or by crook, so that like the brain will do something, or the spirit will do something.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were saying, is like understanding past lives, if you can, will help you resolve whatever is holding you back from a past life potentially. I think is what I think Celicia was saying, and that makes sense to me. I was saying the same thing, is that you get reborn to, you know, learn the things that you didn't learn in your last life. You're here in this life to learn those things in this life, and we're going to keep evolving as we learn more and more, and we're going to keep being reborn to learn more difficult lessons going forward. But I heard you say, if we limit our scientific understanding, limit it to our scientific understanding of consciousness. And I thought that was funny, because science doesn't understand consciousness. It totally baffles scientists. They don't get consciousness. Like, the furthest this consciousness has been able to be traced back is nanotubules in the brain, and they can't, but that's not the origin of consciousness, and they know that. And my argument is that actually the spirit is where the origin of consciousness is, and that's why it baffles scientists, because most are determinists, and so they're not open to the idea of a spirit, and so that's why it baffles scientists today. But the truth is, if they simply open their mind to the idea that we actually have free will and we have a spirit, and that's the origin of consciousness, and then it takes action in microtubules in the brain, consciousness suddenly makes a whole lot of sense and is very rational, reasonable, and explainable in all of our current science and compatible with our current science. But that's another topic for another night. We had a panel on consciousness last year, and I want to let David go.
Actually,
Go
before we
ahead,
move on,
Celicia, go ahead.
I want to point out something ironic, which is a lot of people report that when they go back to the ethereal realm or the void, they feel perfect peace and they feel one with everything. And some people say they feel all-knowing. And so the guilt and shame and I want to go back and redo something, it usually happens when you encounter a being that says, okay, it's time for you to go back. And then you see a life review. And that's when you start having regrets. But outside of that incident, just existing, it's like you don't have any inadequacies or regrets or feelings of negativity. So, and then one other thing is the veil of forgetfulness. Once you get all your memories back and you're aware of everything and you feel connected to everything, then what you did or didn't do in your past life, it really, you don't feel it. It doesn't really matter to you, if that makes sense. The guilt and the shame has to do with, you know, when you're going through that life review and you're someone is trying to figure out in what way you're going to go back and what you're going to work on.
Okay. Well, thank you.
David, go ahead.
Friedrich Nietzsche, he had an idea about reincarnation, which is a little bit different from what most people have been talking about tonight, because tonight we've been talking about generally things where you can improve, somehow make amends for your past lives, or improve your life in the current life, or go forward and things get better. Nietzsche's idea was what he called eternal recurrence. And in that type of reincarnation, you come back, but you come back to the exact identical life that you've currently had, so that everything is identical. But of course, you know, there's long eons and eons of time, and so you don't remember, but each time is like the first time, so it's not like totally boring because you don't remember your whole life. And I'm just wondering if this appeals to anyone here, because I think if you're going to give science any credibility at all, the only possibility is exactly what Nietzsche came up with, where the physics would allow a perfect cycling of the universe, as opposed to this more spiritual way that everyone's talking about here in this group. I can see the appeal. I mean, it's obviously better to have a progressive reincarnation rather than a continual cyclic identical reincarnation, but I still think it's probably more likely to have just a repeat. And I was wondering how Cilicia or Garrett or anyone else thought about if it was a choice between nothingness, like in other words, a one-shot deal and you're dead, or living the same life over and over, which would you prefer? Thank you.
Just to be clear, I don't think everybody is progressing, David. I think some people are regressing and moving backwards and failing to learn, not only failing to learn the lessons that they didn't learn in their last life, they're making tons of stupid mistakes that they didn't make in their last life, and they're going backwards. I think in the long run, they'll eventually figure it out and they'll move forward and progress. And I feel bad for them because they're suffering more than most of the rest of us that are actually progressing. But I don't think everyone is progressing. It's not like the only direction to go is forward. Like the other thing is I'd be curious, like Nietzsche's concept, like I don't know how you can logically defend that, because scientifically, like, you know, time has only moved in one direction, right? The arrow of time kind of only moves in one direction. And so, you know, I like I forget, I think the saying that you can never step into the same stream twice, because the only constant is change. So I don't see how we could possibly be living the same life over and over again, you know, in any conceivable way that reconciles with the universe that we know, you know, since, you know, in the observable universe. So I don't know if you had a logical defense of that I'm missing.
I do indeed.
Go ahead.
Finite universe, that means finite configurations of the constituents that make up the universe, and eternity. So finite universe, but all of eternity to do with it. In other words, you know, the universe never disappears, and it's a dynamic, so it changes configuration continuously.
And so you just figured
and if it's finite,
the finite universe is repeating over and over again.
It has to, just by the nature of, I mean, I'm talking long cycles,
right?
Incredibly long. But if you're given a finite number of constituents moving around, there's only so many configurations before eventually the configurations repeat.
I mean, I think you can have infinite possibilities. I'd have to think more about it, but I think you can
finite. I'm talking finite universe. Infinite universe, you're absolutely correct.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I believe in an infinite universe, so that may be why it doesn't jive with me, his argument.
Sure.
Cilicia, I don't know if you had a comment on David's.
I can only speak about it from the spiritual perspective.
Uh,
And I think, oh, I'm sorry. What did you say?
David's not as into the spirituality, Celicia, so that's why he was.
we may not be on the same wavelength. Go on, Celicia. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Nietzsche, but I think the lives are similar. Similar circumstances, similar themes, but the same, that hasn't been my experience or my observations.
You don't remember the last time we had this meeting? We all said the same thing?
I was gonna say, David, this explains all my feelings for
don't even
deja
remember what
vu,
happened
right?
this
Like,
morning.
Nietzsche's example is like, oh, that's what deja vu is. It's not a short circuit in the brain like scientists think. It's really me just repeating the same history like Groundhog's Day.
Exact. Groundhog's Day is it. Does anyone
Right.
feel that Groundhog's Day is not a pleasant way to spend eternity?
Exactly. I hope that's not what it is. So, Kiefer, let's let you go.
Yeah, I was looking at your argument here on coping with possibility of death. So I'm not seeing like the syllogism. I guess what you're saying is this like a deductive argument? Do you think it's a valid deductive argument, or is this like a deductive argument that uses? Like, I'm not sure what type of argument this is.
So I always get confused about deductive versus inductive reasoning. And so I why don't you describe like what I guess, like, you know, for me the argument is, you know, I wrote it in the same spirit of the computer science proofs that I wrote in college. You know, just using logical, you know, rational explanations starting from axioms and using rules of inference. And so, you know, maybe you can answer your own question better than I can.
Well, I'm a little confused because deductive arguments usually are like analytic arguments where the conclusions follow with certainty. They're necessary, they're true in all possible worlds. That if premise 1 and 2 is true, then like it's true in all possible worlds that the conclusion is true. Like Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore whatever, you know, Socrates is mortal. And that would be true in all possible worlds if the
Got it. Now I just Googled. So it's not inductive, but it's not exactly deductive. It's more of a Bayesian epistemological argument, saying that it's the most likely outcome. And I used that verbiage when I presented the argument, is that I think this is the most likely outcome because I'm a Bayesian epistemologist. And and so I would argue that it's the most likely outcome, but not the only possible outcome. And so I wouldn't argue that it's a deductive, foolproof, ironclad, there is no other possibility, my way or the highway argument. I just think that it's the one that has the most credible reasoning out of the ones that I've been introduced to in my lifetime.
I can give a simple, quick. Inductive is a building from observations.
Yeah, no, I Googled it.
Yeah,
and
but
I remember what the difference is.
Okay, so if it's an inductive argument, because you seem to be making like
it's not really an inductive argument. It's a Bayesian epistemological sort of probabilistic deductive argument rather than a foolproof deductive argument a priori. It's an a priori argument, but it's one of probabilities. Because I don't believe in anything with 100% certainty. Kiefer, I don't believe I exist with 100% certainty. I might be a figment of my own imagination, right?
So what's the probability that reincarnation is true?
I think it's pretty high, quite frankly. I would give it over 80%.
But like what, 60%?
Over 80%.
Over 80%?
Yeah, I would say over 90%, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can disagree with that, right? That's not an area that we have to agree on. You can read my argument and say, look, I disagree here. And if you do, you know, point it out in the online community, say, or here, and point out this is the point where you lose me in your argument. And then we can have a conversation about a specific tangible piece of skepticism and feedback. But after we finish this line of thought, make that your next question, not this one. because I want to let Ellis go. I think she's going to channel the introverts.
Hi,
Did you have
it's
anything
Alice.
else you wanted to say before we let Ellis
Oh, go
go?
ahead.
Kiefer?
I had another question. I forgot.
Can you raise your hand for the, if it's a separate question, just raise your hand. Like we
No, it
do
was a
one question
follow-up.
at a
That's
time,
fine.
if that's okay.
Hi, it's Alice. It's about 1:45. So anyone who hasn't spoken yet, now's the time to raise your hand. Also, if you notice in the chat, I put information about our online community at Free Thinkers and our meetup. I know we have a lot of new people tonight. And also I put Cilicia's information about Starseed Nation. So anybody can look at that. We have a short survey, and if you'd like to go deeper in our 5 intentions, there is a membership, which is free, and you all are welcome to join us in our community. Okay, that's it. Yee.
Great, thanks, Ellis. Val, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So if your contention is true, and I don't doubt it actually, what is the end game? What's the end result? It's, to progress, but what is the final outcome? I mean, I've just never really
Yeah, so
had
I
a
think it's
good explanation on that. Thank you.
It's an existence of being always happy, not suffering from any harm. And this is my opinion, and this is where like I have some skepticism in some of what Cilicia was saying, even because like having people be in this blissful state, I'm like, from my perspective, that's what we're striving for, is a blissful state. And so having people be in it and then get reborn into a non-blissful state, unless they're coming back to help others achieve that blissful state, which is actually very possible. Maybe the reason that that's happening is that people are coming to a lesser existence to help others, progress in their lives and achieve that more blissful state. And that actually does make sense to me in terms of the story, tying together my argument and Cilicia's, experiential evidence. And so actually that's my best hypothesis now, is that I think what we're all striving for is an existence of, pure happiness, no harm, and helping others achieve pure happiness and no harm. And, that can come in various ways. And that's where I would argue, people are asking, well, what are these beings that are dealing with reincarnation? Well, to me, those are evolved beings. And I wrote it in the chat, but I'll say here is that those are evolved beings that are now in charge of what happens to people after death. And what, when do they decide to get reborn? What happens to them when they get reborn? Those are beings like us that have just gone way ahead of us in terms of knowledge and wisdom, and are now helping shepherd other people through this process of evolution and growth. I would argue we're on a path of spiritual growth, whether we like it or not. Those of us who acknowledge it and are trying to spiritually grow move more quickly in the direction that we want to, which is one of increased happiness and decreasing harm. And so I guess hopefully that answers your question as best as I can. I don't know if Cilicia has a different opinion.
You're saying what's the end purpose?
Mm-hmm.
There was this movie called Soul, and they posed this question: is a life worth living based on life purpose versus spark? And right before I came here, why would I leave a heavenly realm and come down to earth? And it's what Garrett said. They just said, well, first there was the guilt about something I did in a past life, and then they presented that I would come and help other people. And so for those 2 reasons, I left this heavenly realm and came here. It's like, oh my God, what have I done? And a lot of people share those sentiments or have that experience that I have. And just quickly, living this life, I've been so caught up in trying to complete my mission, complete my purpose that I've been given, that I committed to. And like I said, at the end of the day, I think I'm just going to end right back up in the void. And so I've put all this pressure and burden on myself. And I kind of feel now, for what? I'm still going to end up in the bliss. And I rather just focus on the moment. I rather just focus on the spark and don't carry that guilt or that shame or trying to resolve something. It's just all a cycle, really. So that's my answer.
That's what I'm gonna encourage Celicia to keep trying hard to do the right thing, because I think that's the right path. Don't give up, and don't think anything is inevitable, because the future is ours to create, in my opinion. And we want to create the future for ourselves and those we can influence that we want to see. And so we should be trying hard to do that. But that said, I want to let MJ go. Good to see you, MJ.
Thank you. Good to see you. Great presentation. I'm really fascinated by this topic. I've been researching, I've been following a lot of people that do past life regression. I study people that actually have like drug-induced revelation and stuff like that. And there's a lot of connection and correlation and this insight that comes from me observing like and even science, like the different things that people experience, and I'm the type of person that likes to try to make connection and trying to understand, because I feel like we're seeing the same thing. It's like watching this big elephant, but like somebody's touching the nose, somebody's touching the feet, and we're saying it's all different thing, but it's all the same thing. One thing that came out of that so far, because I'm still learning, was this idea of good and bad, in the sense where we can't have, it's like, I feel like, okay, there's reincarnation and all these things, but it's there for us to be able to experience life, and we need the contrast of the good and the good and the bad. So everybody that's here, I think as long as you're aligned, that's why you're talking about this whole idea of spark and not putting too much burden, and there's no guilt or anything like that, because everything, if you believe in God creating everything and being everything, and created the good and the bad, it created the contrast. And the good and bad is very it's on a scale, right? It depends on what you compare it to, type of thing. So this whole idea, I hope I'm not getting my thoughts all mixed up, but this whole idea of we need to have different people, because you can't have somebody who's good if there's not somebody who's bad, to be able to live their good karma or whatever, like their good experience of helping other people and stuff like that. So there's no, I guess I came to the conclusion that there's no eradicating one or the other. Like they both need to kind of live in balance and harmony in order for us to have that experience, and then come back to that void where it doesn't matter anymore. And the purpose technically is really just for God, in reflection of everybody, to experience different aspects of life and being, type of thing. So anyways, those are the thoughts that were coming to my mind with this discussion. So thank you.
Celicia, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that dialectic, that good and bad, good and evil, it exists here. You feel that contrast here, but up there, you know, you're black and you're white. You're good and you're evil. You're whole. You're at a peace. And once you start going in the tunnel to earth, then you start to feel the emotions, and you start to feel bad or good, etc. But so I don't remember what you were saying about good and evil, but that's what I could remember.
Yeah, I guess it sounded like you were going down the path of moral subjectivism, which seems to be like, is that what you were going down, MJ, or
I
no?
don't know what that is. Moral subjectivism. Yeah.
I'm sorry, MJ. I was wondering if that was what she was trying to say or not.
No, well, it's more the thing is, because I, for example, when you were talking about Hitler being reincarnated as a cockroach,
Yep.
it's kind of like, in my head, I'm like, no matter what he did, like he had his own mission or whatever. I'm saying that I did agree with what he's saying, what he did, but at the end he comes back and he's going to be part of that void as well, because he's also a creation of God or whatever type thing. So I don't know why he was there and did these things, but like to kind of decide what's going to happen to him after he had a mission, and because of what he did, some other people did a lot of great things as well. So I'm in the part of my mind, I'm not that I'm agreeing and I want somebody else to do that, but that's just part of what we live in right now. And to kind of like judge that after, saying that he's going to reincarnate into something, not that I'm saying that you said something bad about him, but it's just the thing that came to my mind is like, we we don't know that that's necessarily that he's going to be punished in the next life for doing that type of thing. So yeah,
I tried to make a pretty good logical argument that he will be, or that he was, quite frankly, and is being punished still, probably, because I doubt he's really learned all his lessons yet. Although maybe he's an evolved human being, and you know, who knows? But you know, if you know, we are treated fairly after death, I think that people who sorry, 5-minute warning, people who cause lots of harm in their life, that is unnecessary harm, which I call harm that doesn't prevent a greater harm, are going to be, you know, limited in their influence in their next life. And a cockroach has far less influence than, you know, someone that has the capability to be a world leader, in which he was in his life. He was Time Man of the Year, right? So he was a world leader in his time. And so I would argue that fairness is, you know, important to, you know, evolved beings, and whatever deals with what happens to us after life, I would argue that they're probably fair. And if you think that moral subjectivity is the answer, you know, we will eventually, hopefully, probably it'll be late this year by the time I write the essay on morality, but we'll have an event on, you know, objective morality, and I'm going to try to make a good argument that objective morality exists. And I'll just leave you with the thought of, if you think that there is no objective moral, think about killing an innocent person who causes no harm to anyone, poses no threat to anyone, and does not want to die. How can you argue that there is a subjective reason to kill that person? And Hitler did, right? He killed millions of those people. And so I would just argue that there is good and bad, and there is right and wrong. And what we should do is trust our inherent sense of what's right and wrong, and do what we think is right in our hearts. And if we do what we think is right in our hearts, and we're really honest with ourselves about it, that we end up in a much better place than if we just do what our ego tells us to do, which is what a lot of people do.
Yeah, I guess it's not about moral objectivity. It's more a question of like a bigger perspective, because he was not the only. If it was just him and nobody else who actually helped him, he would not have been able to do it just by himself. There was other people that were there too. And there's like, I guess it's like to do a 360 and see the whole picture, and not just like pinpoint people as being black and white. There's a very gray area of these did a lot of bad things.
There are lots of people that were in gray areas, like people who were, you know, had a gun held to their head and were told, kill this person or I'm going to kill you. That's a gray area. But Hitler is not a gray area. That guy gave into his ego and killed lots of innocent people. He's not a gray area. He was the head of it all, right? He was the one that was leading the charge.
But
and
the other
don't get me
people-
wrong, I feel bad for the guy, because he got made fun of. He had a horrible, you know, he was like ostracized and vilified, and he was verbally beaten down, and like he had a tough life. But he also didn't, like, some people have a tough life and end up more compassionate. He ended up heartless with a tough life, and that's not the right way to respond to a difficult life.
Yeah, I'm not saying just him, like I'm just saying there's other people that were there and that actually did the killing, and there's also people that were the scientists that did all this
Yep.
stuff. the bad
We
stuff.
all follow our path, MJ. Like we all make our decisions, and we all get to decide who we support and who we don't.
For sure.
And if no one supported Hitler, he would never have been anyone to anyone, but people did, and he convinced them to. And the question is, who are you going to side with as a person? And I think each one of us have to, you know, use our own critical thinking skills to decide who we're going to support and who we're not going to support, and who to put our weight behind. Who do we buy from? Who do we buy products from as a consumer? And so, you know, all of this, like we all live complicated lives and have to make decisions about who to put our weight behind. And it's important who we put our weight behind, because when enough people put their weight behind someone, they become influential, even if they shouldn't be. And so, yeah. So I want to let the Sunny go, because we still have 3 hands up and it's 8:58. So we're going to finish up. Ellis, did you have something urgent? Can I let Sunny go?
Oh, it's nothing urgent. I just wanted to set an intention before we all go. I just wanted to say that I hope that everyone here tonight has a dream or receives a gem of wisdom about their present lives on Earth right now. That's all.
Great, thanks. Sunny, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed hearing all your thoughts and all the interesting ideas. Um, when you were asking, or there was a comment regarding what was the point of this whole thing, coming and going, I remember going back to some studies I did on Eastern religion many, many years ago. And the point of all this in that particular tradition, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you which one it was because I went through a real number of them. But anyway, in one particular tradition, the idea was that we were all God. We were all a piece of God, experiencing life as a human. We are experiencing ourselves, or God is experiencing itself as this entity called human. And ultimately, the goal is reunification of the Godhead. That is the point of everything. And in order to do that and to have a full experience, the supreme force, the whatever we want to call it, is just going through the phases, and we are it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I would argue, the Bible says we're made in God's image, and I would argue that, God or his servants were the ones that breathed life into us and gave us sentience or free will. And that's what gives meaning to life. Quite frankly, if the world was deterministic and we made no decisions, then what meaning would there be to life? We would just be automatons. And so,
I was not suggesting that we don't have choices. That's part
Sure.
of this whole process. The
Yeah.
whole process is God having choices to be evil, to do bad things, to do right things, to
Right.
love animals, to torture animals. That's the point of it, is for God to have this experience beyond what it has known. And then ultimately, and this is not something I made up. This was one of these religious traditions I dabbled in many years ago.
Yep.
Just
No,
thought.
I agree. I think we're all here to learn. And so let me let Peter go.
Oh, wait, I wanted to say,
Go ahead.
Dolores
Yeah, go
Cannon,
ahead, Cecily.
the psychotherapist that focused on the past life regression, a lot of the people that she did the hypnosis on said the planets are living beings, and those higher beings that you spoke of, Garrett, they watch over all the planets, because what you do on one planet, it has a vibration, has an effect on all the other planets and bodies in the universe. And so there's something about seeding life on planets, and then depending on how it's going, if the planet becomes self-destructive, there are volunteers that go, and they place certain people on the planet to try to change the trajectory of the planet. So the purpose may not necessarily be just for your own benefit, for the individual's benefit. It could also be for the whole.
Great, thanks. Peter, go ahead, and then we're gonna let David go, and then we're gonna close out because it's a little after 9.
So yes, I was thinking, I might have mentioned this modern thinker before. It's the famous internet famous Jordan Peterson had this thing where he talks about a subject that I think we've sort of been talking about throughout our discussion here, but haven't used the specific word for, which is nihilism. And sort of the major issue that Dr. Peterson says with nihilism is that the term is misleading, that people think it means nothing. It means, whereas usually the reason that people don't like nihilism isn't because it signifies nothing. It's more because it signifies nothing but suffering. And so the idea of being in any sort of existence where there's nothing but suffering is, well, I mean, it's pretty much synonymous with hell. But there was a point I was going to make, which is the idea of, we've mentioned this idea of sort of that's consistent with heaven, which is you get back to this sort of ultimate state of bliss and love. And I've often heard the refutation to that being something to the effect of, well, wouldn't that get boring? And then I'm always curious about that, because it occurred to me, but wait a minute, isn't boredom a form of suffering? So if there's no suffering, then you wouldn't be bored. It's sort of there's often this argument. This is the same thing about like utopianism. Like people will say, well, if everybody had everything in a perfectly happy, blissful state, wouldn't that get boring? And then I often well, I have to say, well, no, because if you have no suffering, you're not going to be bored. You have to suffer to be bored. Because I mean, that's a certain type of it. I don't know if that was a completely coherent line of thoughts, but I wanted to get over to the thing about nihilism, because I think that is, well, I mean, I think that nihilism is an issue that's sort of, that is probably deeply present in a lot of the issues of reincarnation, past lives, and moving forward to whatever our teleology is.
Yeah, the philosophical definition of nihilism is an extreme form of skepticism, the denial of all real existence or the possibility of an objective basis in truth. And I guess I would go back to my argument that on objective reality, which is that even if everything we experience is a simulation, the winning strategy is to treat it as if it's real. So for me, that's sort of like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter whether we're in a simulation or not. We perceive reality, and the best thing that we can do is to treat it as if it's reality. So, it's an academic exercise at best, but that may not be what you mean by nihilism. So, yeah, I'm sorry if it's not what you meant.
Oh, no, yeah, no, nihilism is, I was more thinking of like nihilism is, in the modern sense, more consistent almost with like a deep, very dark, depressive state. Like some people say they're nihilistic if they have no hope for the future. It's less of like a cognitive thing.
Yeah, nihilists like generally like don't believe in free will and are determinists and think that everything is fruitless and there's no purpose to life whatsoever and there's no meaning to life whatsoever. And that is a very dark path. And I think we all inherently feel like there should be some meaning to life, and most of us are searching for it. I think I've found it. At least, I have can make a good logical argument that, evolution, growth, and increasing happiness and decreasing harm is a good direction to go in terms of using a compass to move in a certain direction. That's, I think, a good directional path to go in. And so for me, that's what I have set as my life goal, is to increase happiness and decrease harm for the people that I can influence. And I encourage other people to do the same thing, because I think it'll make a better world if a lot of us are doing that same thing. So that said, all right, David, I'm going to let you go just because I like you, but I got to go to sleep soon. So go ahead.
Do we really need free will in order to have meaning? I mean, if we have a pleasant life, or we're having an experience of being alive, whether or not we have free will seems a little bit
So to your point, David, if we act like we have free will, then we're really doing the same thing as if we have free will, and it becomes an academic exercise. And most people who don't believe we have free will agree that we should act like we have free will anyway. And so I mentioned that in my my evening that we talked about free will, is that it really is an academic exercise, because even the people who claim we don't have free will agree that we shouldn't act like we don't have free will, because that's a really dark path to act like we don't have free will. Go ahead.
There is one benefit to not thinking we have free will, and that is it lessens guilt. In other words, you don't feel so bad about the way things turned out for yourself, because you don't feel you were responsible. A lot of people kick themselves and say, I should have done this, I should have done that. I'm my own worst
but that's
enemy.
a very healthy response, because that's what helps us learn. And for me, the purpose of this earth is learning. It's learning wisdom and knowledge. And the kicking yourself is where we kick ourselves for making a mistake, so we learn to do better next time. And I'm not a big believer in beating yourself up. All I would say is that we should learn from our mistakes. And once we've learned the lesson from the mistake that we've made, then we move forward with a better path forward. But that, all I'm saying is that that place of beating ourselves up actually comes from an innate, healthy place of wanting to learn the lessons from the mistakes we've made. And so I would argue that it's an unhealthy behavior that comes about for a healthy reason. It's just that we need to take the healthy reason, in which is that we need to learn the lessons from the past and let go of the shame, the guilt, and the beating yourself up. If you let go of the beating yourself up, but you make sure you're actually learning the lessons from the mistakes you've made, you can get the best of both worlds. You learn from your mistakes, you move forward in a better direction. You don't feel the guilt and the shame and the anger and the beating yourself up. And that's the path forward that I take. And I'm extremely happy since I started going down that path, and I learned much faster, because when I was beating myself up, I was so busy, beating myself up, that I wasn't learning as much. And if I focus on just learning the lessons from the mistakes I've made, now I'm focused on the real value add, which is the learning.
Beautiful.
So I want to thank everybody for coming, especially Celicia for sharing her experiences, for all the time that went into her presentation and putting together the materials. So thank you so much, Celicia, and for inspiring the event. So, my whole presentation came about because Celicia had her experiences, and I wanted to share my thoughts on the subject of reincarnation and on reincarnation across the universe, quite frankly, because interestingly, we just met, and this event kind of came together synergistically. All of my arguments and stuff were independent of Celicia. I didn't come up with them to defend her, but they all happened to defend everything that she was saying and talking about. And so I found that really interesting. And I found that, as we pieced together throughout this evening, it found that our stories actually jived in a way that was uncoordinated and very synergistic. And I think that's, very interesting. And I think the fact that reincarnation, which I only learned about from having advertised this event, has been studied by science and is largely supported by science. Actually, the science predominantly agrees that reincarnation exists, was fascinating. That blew my mind. I keep telling people up until this, I kept telling people, oh, I hope I make enough money that I can actually study reincarnation to see whether or not it exists. Well, people already did it. I'm late to the game here, so it's already been done. And I think that's really cool. And so there's a lot for us to read about it and get more well-informed. And I know Will's a skeptic, and that's why he's raising his hand. You wanna have a last word, Will? Go ahead.
I know you're closing up, Garrett. I wouldn't be
It's
so
well
rude
past
as
my
to-
bedtime, my friend.
Just very quickly, when you were talking about somebody killing a cockroach at this moment in New York City, at that exact millisecond, I was in the downstroke of killing a big cockroach that was running down my hallway.
That was Hitler, that cockroach. I'll guarantee you.
That freaked
All right,
me
I just made that
out.
up.
I thought, don't say it. I heard you say cockroach, and I thought, don't say it now. And that was the exact moment that I splattered.
Thank you, Will.
Couldn't have been more well timed. That freaked me out.
So I do want to thank everybody for the great conversation, comments, questions. For those that were quiet, we hope you'll speak up next time. Usually the quietest people in the room have the most insightful things to say. Although we're lucky that David actually speaks up, even though I think he's an introvert, but he has really insightful stuff to say. And I might be wrong, David, I'm just guessing. It was great to have you all, and great to meet you all, and great to see a lot of the regulars. So thanks a lot, everybody. Hope you all have a great rest of your night, and
Thank
hope
you.
to see you all at next week's event and in the online community between now and then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.